the point I was making yesterday was that we really take science very seriously, and I take it very seriously. And this work is the first of its kind in the world. And I really get frustrated when people say there's no science or you're a pseudoscientist, and it's been very taxing to live with that. But anyway, my point is that this is world-class research being done here, right here in Cape Town, not anywhere else. And it shows that I am deeply committed to doing world-class research. I'd also like to add that as a consequence of this research, the next year we put in a competitive grant to the National Research Foundation, competing with everyone in the country for the highest grants. There's a very few small grants that are given out each year. And we won one of those grants to study insulin resistance in marathon runners, which hasn't been done anywhere in the world. And it was a competitive grant worth a couple of million rand. And just to make the point again that what I say is based on my deep, deep desire to do good science, not just good science, the best in the world. And that is why I'm an A1 rated scientist. And it would really be appreciated if people would acknowledge that we do world-class research, and that has been my career. And because I'm recognized as a world-class scientist, people like Dr. Volek and Dr. Finney, who were the people who first, I remember I read the book that converted me. These are the two leading authorities on the low carbohydrate diet in the world. And they asked me to write an editorial with them. And so that was the consequence. But the point of showing you this article is for the figure that comes in the article. So although I'm a co-author, I don't claim to be the world authority on what's written on this slide. But this is Jeff Volek, Steve Finney's work. They've been thinking about ketone bodies for 25 years. Not 5 minutes here and there, 25 years. And here they believe deeply that keto adaptation, in other words, adapting to a very low carbohydrate diet that produces ketosis, is very important for elite athletes. And that's the argument. Now, I'm not suggesting that I agree with that. What I want you to follow is on the top, you see they talk about fuel, ketone bodies being used as a fuel, and then they talk about it as used as a signaler. And this is very complex biochemistry, and molecular chemistry, of which I'm not an expert. But my point is that there is evidence in the literature that ketone bodies don't just work as a fuel source, they have other actions as well. And they believe that these are very important for our long-term health. And that is why they propose a ketogenic diet, which I have never promoted, but they do. And because they understand it better than I do, they feel that ketones have special importance in the human body. And so my point is that this is what the world-class researchers are writing. And we need to hear more of this and less of ketones are just dangerous for your health and they're going to kill you. It may be the exact opposite, that the ketotic state may be the most healthy state there is. And these are the people who are driving that research. And you can see that on the left, so you go from keto adaptation to metabolic health and longevity. So they argue that there is evidence in the literature and the chemical explanations for why ketones actually improve your health and improve your life expectancy, which is the precise opposite of what we've been taught and what we've been hearing in this hearing. So that's the theoretical paradigm by which ketogenic diets may benefit athletes. So it's athletes, but you noticed it wasn't just athletes with metabolic health. And they have both energetic effects affecting metabolism and epigenetic effects, i.e. changing the way we express our genes, affecting altered gene expression. The physiological manifestation of nutritional ketosis may positively impact performance, recovery, and health. In addition to these direct fueling benefits in the keto-adapted athletes, beta-hydroxybutyrate, that's one of the ketone bodies, is associated with reduced oxidative stress and inflammation. And we've not heard of that in any of the expert witness. And its signaling mirrors many of the pathways associated with stress resistance and longevity. Again, we didn't hear that from any of the experts.
Professor, when you refer to the experts, you refer to the experts called by the performer complainant.
That's correct. So we move on to this study, which was published in 2015. This is a very recent paper, and it's an experimental model in which they exposed they damaged the brains of rats, and then they fed them different foods, either the ketogenic diet or the non-ketogenic diet. And their finding was that the ketogenic diet decreases oxidative stress and improves mitochondrial respiratory capacity in this model. So the conclusions are in this model of post-traumatic brain injury. But this is the conclusion. These results strongly suggest that ketones improve post-traumatic brain injury cerebral metabolism by providing alternative substrates and through antioxidant properties. And we hear dietitians telling us all the time that we must eat foods which have antioxidant properties. Well, the substrate which provides the best antioxidant properties might be ketone bodies, preventing oxidative stress-mediated mitochondrial dysfunction. And I think it's very important at this time that I should make another strong point, that there's a lot of evidence on the benefits of ketones which we haven't discussed. And if we were to discuss all the evidence, we would be here for 2 months, not 1 month. And so I would like to make the point, Madam Chair, that all the information that I've provided, the 4,000 or 5,000 pages, is, I believe, relevant to the case, but we haven't had time to go through with all of it. But I would like to suggest that we have submitted that information on the record and that it should be part of the record. Everything that we have discovered should be part of the record, even though we haven't referred to specifically each specific study. That is the material I've read and discovered because that informs my opinion at this point in time. And we haven't had a chance to go through all of it, but we've been through sufficient to make the points that I'm trying to make. However, there is additional information, and I would encourage people to read that information as well. And so now, having discussed the role of ketone bodies, I again want to emphasize that the whole basis of giving carbohydrates to people with type 2 diabetes or encouraging people to eat lots of carbohydrate is this statement that carbohydrate is the only energy source for the brain. And again, this is 2014 in a publication in South Africa from a registered dietitian. And the point we're trying to make is that that is nonsensical, because the study of Owen et al., which we have discovered, established that prolonged fasting reduces glucose oxidation rates right down to 24 grams per 24 hours. So this statement is incorrect and needs to be changed. And it's so important because this is the basis that many people use for prescribing high carbohydrate diets. And what the whole point we've been showing you is that ketones can be used instead of glucose, and that was the basis of the study that we did in our laboratories and which I showed you at great length. So now we're just going to summarize the ketone story, and this is what is written in Raising Superheroes, so it's accessible there. So this is a summary then of the ketone and childhood as I see it. Evidence of the importance of ketones to infant metabolism is substantial. It's been found that 30% of the fetal brain injury requirements are provided by ketones. The use of ketones is continued by the newborn at delivery. There is further upregulation after birth of enzymes in the brain that direct the use of ketones. So if ketones were not important to the health of the brain of the infant, that would not happen. So the brain of the newborn is already using ketones, and in its wisdom, the brain sees the need to activate the enzymes that will increase the use of ketones. And so there's the evidence. Blood ketone levels in infants are elevated during the suckling period. We've shown you that. Breast milk is ketogenic, as we've shown, so that the brains of infants have a greater uptake of ketone bodies than has been reported in adults. So the brain of the infant uses ketones to a greater extent than adults. So it has to be important. Ketones have to be increasingly important for children or infants, with the result that as much as 25% of the neonate's basal energy requirements in the first several days of life come from the use of ketones. Now that's not just brain, that's the whole body. So 25% of the neonate's energy metabolism comes from ketones. So that is substantial. Even more convincing is the finding that the fetus has the capacity to produce its own ketones dependent on its mother's provision, of what its mother provides. So when you read that, you cannot conclude that ketones are dangerous or toxic or damaging to infants. And if you did conclude that, it's because you didn't know the literature and you didn't take the effort to go and read the literature as I have and as we have reported in our book. And this is the point that in the, as I've described at great length, in the fetus, the baby is exposed to a high carbohydrate diet. It's burning glucose from its mother as its main fuel. And remember, that's why she's insulin resistant, so she can provide more glucose to the baby than to herself. Few understand at birth the newborn undergoes an abrupt change from a high carbohydrate and a low fat diet to a high fat, low carbohydrate diet. That high-fat diet provided by the mother's breast milk and the ketosis that it induces in the newborn is critical for the subsequent growth of the infant's brain, and we presented that data yesterday. Since rapid brain growth continues for the first 2 years of the infant life, it is logical the foods onto which he or she is weaned should be those that will continue to provide the fuel needed for building the brain, and that, it turns out, is ketones. As a result, some specialists have convincingly argued, and I give a reference there, weaning onto a ketogenic diet would be healthier than weaning onto a high-carb diet. Now, are they saying that this has to be a very low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet? Stephen Finney and Jeff Olick might say, yes, ketones are so healthy for all of us that we should all be on a ketogenic diet. I do not say that because I'm not enough of an expert. And all I've said is that you need to be weaned on a low-carbohydrate diet of the kind that will provide sufficient ketones for brain health. And so then we just finish up with talking about the other structural fats the other dietary fats that are required for the structure of the brain. Again, to emphasize that fats are critical to brain health and brain development at a young age. 50 to 60% of the structural matter of the brain and retina comprises DHA, which is an essential fat, the majority of which is laid down during the period of maximum brain growth that begins at 26 weeks of conception and continues until about 2 years, with 80% occurring between weeks 26 and 40 after conception. So this is the critical area in our development when we need the correct diet to develop our brains. During this period of rapid growth, as much as 70% of the baby's energy is partitioned for brain growth, so that even though it's burning a lot of energy, most of that energy is being built to build the brain. Many believe that a key driver of human evolution and the development of our large brains occurred when we added foods rich in omega-3 oils. Those are the healthy polyunsaturated fats, which are found mainly in fish oils, and the other brain-specific nutrients, perhaps as recently as 200,000 years ago. In the Real Meal Revolution, we provided evidence that this defining event may have occurred along the southern Cape Coast near Mossel Bay, and that's the story of the Pinnacle Point Caves. And there are many people who do honestly believe that it was the exposure to omega-3s and the other brain-rich nutrients that you find in fish foods and foods along the seashore that helped us become human. So we state there, to ensure optimum brain development, we need to ensure that newborns and infants are provided with an abundance of these two fats, these specific fats that are essential. They will not find this in an industrial diet based on grains and from which animal foods, dairy, and especially fish and shellfish are excluded, nor in a vegetarian type diet. So my point is, I'm trying to suggest that there is a good diet that's going to make our brains healthy, and that is a meat, fish-based diet with eggs and dairy. And that if we're going to exclude that from our diet or not make it the priority, the primary priority, there are consequences for the nation because our children will not develop the brains that they require. A healthy fetal brain is made from saturated fats, omega-3 fatty acid, amino acids, from proteins and essential vitamins and minerals, all of which must be found in abundance in the pregnant mother's blood supply. The best way to achieve this is to remove omega-6 rich industrial seed oils, because they provide omega-6s, which the child does not need in the same concentrations, from the mother's diet, particularly corn, soybean, canola, sunflower, safflower, and grapeseed oils, all of which are chemically processed, and that we don't know what the long-term effects of that chemical processing is. What we do know is that in 1970, people warned that when you process these foods, you produce trans fats, and everyone said that trans fats are dangerous, and they're still being processed. We don't know what the long-term consequences are. And so we should be encouraging consumption of fishes that are rich in these two particular polyunsaturated fats. Excellent source of fatty fish like salmon and tuna, with crabs, prawns, and eggs also good options. we move on that there is evidence that only a meat-based weaning diet will provide all the zinc, all the iron, and the other nutrients required by the rapidly growing brain. In addition, iron absorption from meat is much greater than from iron-fortified cereals, and meat produces a healthier gut bacterial flora, the biome in the gut, than do cereals, and the other negative health implications of cereals notwithstanding. So it's on the basis of that evidence that when we wrote the book, that we came to the conclusion that we need to wean our children onto diets that are full of the nutrient-dense, full of the nutrients that the brain needs to develop. And that should be the priority, and we should be telling everyone that. And we shouldn't be mixing our words. We should be absolutely frank. And it doesn't matter if the political consequences, there are political consequences of making that statement, because it means we have to change the way that we farm and produce produce in this country, and we have to change the focus from the cereals, which to my mind are not the key the best way to raise our children's brains. And so then this is the last slide in this section, and it's just to show that these are the three fundamental pillars of advice on which the book Raising Superheroes rests. Eliminate or drastically reduce sugar from your child's diet. I don't think anyone really contends that. Reduce refined carbohydrates and include real non-processed whole foods rather than non-nutritious, unhealthy processed foods in your child's diet. And so in the information that I tweeted, that is the focus. That fits in my philosophy, that we need to remove the non-nutritious, unhealthy processed foods from the child's diet, and we need to replace it with real foods. And the point is, as I've shown you in great length, that the Gerber's foods were the first industrial foods. And what did they target? They targeted the children. And there have been major consequences that we started to raise our children on cereal-based foods which do not provide all the nutrients their brains require. Thank you very much.